Welcome to the first session within our Study in USA series. This session, as most of you must already know, is about applying for graduate programs in the United States. And this is what the outline for today's session is going to look like. I'm going to very, very briefly introduce you to Project EduAccess in case this is the first EduAccess session that you are attending. I'm also going to briefly tell you a little bit about our Study in USA series and what other workshops you can expect to see as part of this series in the future. Then I'm going to introduce you to the wonderful panelists for the day who will take you through their own experiences studying in the US. So as you can see, there's going to be a little overview of what studying in the US looks like, why you should be picking the US over other countries, the types of universities in the UK, what the application process and requirements look like, what the timelines are, what kind of funding avenues you may be able to consider, and what career outcomes and working while studying in the USA is going to look like. So once we get through this initial part of the workshop, we will turn to the Q&A session, which is when I want all of you to become the brave souls that you are and unmute yourselves and ask whatever questions come to your mind. Please don't think that your questions are silly or whatever. Just ask whatever it is that you want to, because it's always better to get clear advice from people who have gone through the process than to, have lingering doubts in your mind when it comes to this extremely overwhelming applications journey. So please don't hesitate to ask all questions that you want to. Now, a little bit about Project EduAccess. We realize that access to higher education, leadership, and professional opportunities is often restricted to the most privileged people in society. And that's why EduAccess came about as a modest attempt to improve inclusivity in these spaces, especially for individuals coming from marginalized communities and underrepresented backgrounds in the global South. There are a range of interventions that we adopt. The most popular intervention of ours, I suppose, is the mentorship program, which I assume quite a few of you are a part of. The second most popular intervention of ours is, of course, the information, advice, and guidance-based work that we do, a part of which also is this Study in USA series and all the public workshops that we organize, which are all, open to all. But apart from this, we also do a range of capacity building and leadership skill development sessions and evidence-based advocacy. We currently have operations in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, as well as Afghanistan, and hope to expand to more jurisdictions in the global South. Now, that said, we are now here for the Study in USA series, as you know, and the session that we are at today is about applying for graduate programs in the USA. This is more of an introductory informational session. But as you know, or as you may have discovered by now, if you are following us on our social media, this is a 5-week-long series. And in future weeks, you can expect to hear more specific details about graduate applications to Ivy League institutions in the US, graduate programs in STEM in the US, PhD programs in social sciences and humanities in the US, a range of scholarship and funding opportunities for graduate programs in the US, applying for MBA programs in the US, and finally, we'll close this series with what we have decided to call a Study in the USA application clinic, which is just going to be, a Q&A where you just come with your questions and get all the answers you need. That being said, for today's session, we are joined by the 3 wonderful people on your screen at the moment. So we have Mahathi, who's doing a master's in global health development at Georgetown. We have Daksh, who has just graduated as a master in public policy from Harvard. And then we are also joined by Taha, who is doing her PhD in religion or religious studies at Emory. So between themselves, the speakers today can speak in English, Hindi, Urdu, and Kashmiri. So in case you're unable to articulate any question in English and feel more comfortable in asking these questions in the languages that the speakers are familiar with, then please feel free to. Our speakers will try their best to answer your questions in a language that you are comfortable speaking, and will hopefully also provide a translation for the benefit of those who cannot speak in that language. I'm Mahathi, go for it. I see that you have your hand.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to add that I also speak Telugu, so Hindi and Telugu, because I forgot to add it into the presentation. Yeah.
Perfect. No, that's always useful to know. Thank you. Okay, great. I think on that note, I'm gonna hand over to Taha.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Gayathree, for introducing all of us. And thank you to everybody who joined us today. You see me very often, I guess, on Project EduAccess now by now. And not surprisingly, we are doing it the other way around when a PhD student is talking about applications in the US, and then we will follow it by master's students. Well, the US, like any other country in the world, has many programs to offer. The only difference is that it is a very big country, almost looks like 52 countries put together, offering so many programs and so many courses, and has a lot of money for, of course, various reasons that we already know of. As it is, we have master's programs here and also PhD programs, which master's program typically are for about a year or two. Unlike the UK system, wherein most of the master's programs that you see are either for 9 months, 11 months, 12 months, not more than that, usually. Whereas the US has it for 1 to 2 years, offering both course-based professional courses as well as research-based academic options. You would call that as research by, sorry, MPhil or master's by research, or master's by taught programs is how you would put it otherwise. Then for PhD programs, well, a bummer is that the PhDs are here very, very, very long. They range from 4 to 6 years mostly. 4 is an understatement. I don't know why we even put in 4 here, but they focus on advanced research, and often, I mean, because you've no option, then you get you're led on to an academic or a research career, which is not always the case, but mostly the case. 4 to 6 years would not just entirely mean doing a PhD that is your own research, but it is, you have an additional understanding of what you're going to do in the first formative years of your PhD program. That is called a coursework, which then leads you to a dissertation or a research that you would do full-fledgedly on something. Hence, it takes you quite a long time. In other words, you can think of a PhD program here in the US as a master's with a PhD. MA PhD is what some universities often call it, for the first 2 years of your coursework being an MA, and then followed by your PhD as is. Popular fields of study, I mean, you can do anything and everything here in the US. But for students coming from the global south, it seems that the most sought after courses here in the US seem to be fields in fields in sciences, which include but are not limited to engineering, business, computer science, biological sciences, and also social sciences. As I said already, program duration varies by field. Sometimes it also takes you 8 years, my friends. But mostly at an average of it, you would essentially take 5 years in a PhD program. But some science courses, as is my understanding, also allow you to finish your program quite early on, which includes, say, between 4 years at a minimum to 6 years at an average. Master's courses, as I already said, would last around, say, 14 months to 2 years is how I mean, the master's programs look like, but I'm pretty sure my friends Daksh and Mahathi can give you a much better understanding of the master's programs. Yes, why the US? I think pretty much of why the US is to deal with that US has better funding options. Believe me on that, because I have tried it and tested it. And US, besides being known for many other things, is also known pretty much for good funding opportunities. Um, but above all, US is a home to many top-ranking universities. Even if you were to look up online and see which are the best universities in the world, US would always top. So you have many good high-ranking universities, which include but are not limited to Harvard, MIT, Stanford, and other universities. The other thing that is very good here in the US, as I said, is that if you're enrolled in a program, you're not restricted to doing a set of courses, and the timeline and the choice of courses and majors that you're given is not restricted to what the course already has to offer you, but they allow you to maximize your understanding or diversity, maximize the diversity of understanding other things that you can do in your master's programs, hence, or PhD programs. Hence, you have ability to say customize courses or switch majors and even pursue interdisciplinary studies. I know so many students are doing pre-medical or medicine degrees, and they are doing what classes on spirituality. Sometimes some people do philosophy alongside that, or sometimes people just do art and creative work while doing other things. So the interdisciplinary nature that the US offers you, my understanding says no other, no other country in the world can offer you as holistically as the US has it. As I already said, high investment in research and development, and lots of federal or endowments that the US gets is unmatchable with any other country anywhere in the world. Hence, you have better funding opportunities here, and therefore it leads to better research opportunities, both in academia or in industry, as is. Well, people say that US is a melting pot, and there's no particular culture or ethnicity that could be called as American per se, because so many people from different parts of the world come in here looking for opportunities. That in itself creates it to be a multicultural environment that is helpful for most of the students, especially students coming from the global south, who find a lot of people coming in from those areas, including South Asia and other places in the South. That becomes not just interesting in terms of finding your own community, but also finding better networking opportunities here. Um, is as regards to what would one expect after a postgraduate work or postgraduate study in terms of work, I think again Daksh and Mahathi could respond better to that, because they have been in the job market, or some of them have already gotten some positions that they can expect and expand more on. You have opportunities for OPT, that is an option to leave to remain in the US after you complete your degree, or even get opportunities such as getting an H-1B visa, which again they will probably highlight more on. If I were to compare it with the UK, since I have already had a degree from the UK in terms of having a MPhil from the UK, so what makes it different from it, or what are the pros and cons? I may highlight that more if you ask me some questions later. The UK programs, as I already said, are shorter programs ranging from 9 months to 1 year, mostly. And even for PhD programs, they are 3 to 3.5 years, unless people already doing a PhD in the UK would disagree to say so. But there are few interdisciplinary options. If there is a set course schedule, I will not say it is similar to how it is in South Asia, but still it is restricted in the senses of you may not be able to do, say, for an instance, humanities and still take a course in what astronomy. But in the US, you can pretty much do that, even if you were to take course 100 level at a PhD program, wanting to learn about astronomy while doing a PhD in humanities. Uh, However, in the Europe, as you would see, if you were to self-fund yourself, it seems to me that there are low tuition costs. However, at the same time, the US has better funding opportunities and better acceptance of scholarships as opposed to the UK, which I can probably highlight more on if you ask me more questions in the Q&A session. So a stark difference, but not something that you could be affected by, as my understanding is differences between how US universities are set up. We have two options of universities, public and private. Public and private in the senses does not impact how your education should be like, because all of them are at par with each other. But sometimes it does vary in terms of offering you different tuition costs if you were to self-fund your education, which for most of the PhD programs, as far as my understanding goes, is not the case. But for master's programs, yes, many students come on self-funding options. Again, my colleagues will be able to answer that for you. For public universities, they're usually funded by the government or the federal state, as is. And tuition fees can be usually lesser than those of the private universities. Examples again include, but are not limited to, all universities in California, universities of California, which include San Diego, Irvine, Berkeley, Los Angeles, etc. Then you have Penn State, University of Michigan, University of Texas, both at Texas A&M and University of Texas at Austin is a public university. Then you have University of Georgia at Athens and University of North Carolina. But there are also others. I just try to put up some of the major known universities among people in the global south. Then there are private universities. Private universities include all your Ivy Leagues that are very famous as is, and places like MIT, Stanford, Caltech, Duke, etc. Even when the tuition fees and other things are higher and they are expensive to attend, but they have better facilities and greater number of scholarships to offer to you. And I think now somebody else should take it up from here.
Yeah, that's me. Thank you, Taha, for a really wonderful, comprehensive introduction. I'm Mahathi. I'm a master's student at Georgetown University in DC. Sorry, just give me a second to. Okay. So as you know, to pursue a master's degree, you are going to need to have an undergraduate degree. And most universities require the GRE or the GMAT, although there are a lot of universities that offer waivers or the option not to take it these days. I didn't have to take the GRE or the GMAT for my program, so that will be program specific. Always look it up on the university that you're applying to. And yes, there will be specific requirements for certain programs, certain fields. For example, if it's law, you're going to need the LSAT. If it's medicine, you're going to need MCAT. So, I mean, every field has its own requirements with regards to some degrees require work experience. For example, my program is a practitioner-based program, and it requires a minimum of 2 years of work experience. So again, these are specific to the program and to the college, so always look it up. The supporting documents you're going to need are a statement of purpose, which I think most of you are probably familiar with. It's your main essay that you submit along with your application that kind of explains your motivation to pursue this particular master's. Letters of recommendation from usually from faculty, and it can also be from employers if you have work experience. And you will also need to submit a CV or resume. Pretty much all master's programs will have application fees usually $50 to $150, but many of them will offer fee waivers, many if not all. Usually there will be instructions on the application page as to how to request a fee waiver. Often it's as simple as sending an email with your reasons for requesting one. So yes, master's programs do require, in the US, do require English language proficiency tests. Usually it's the TOEFL or the IELTS, and I believe the TOEFL is most commonly accepted, but the IELTS is an alternative. Some universities are now also accepting the Duolingo English test, which I guess could be a more affordable option because both TOEFL and IELTS, do have fees that need to be paid to take them. Also, there are, this is much rarer, but there are some colleges that will waive your English language proficiency test if you studied the entirety of your undergraduate degree in English. So it's always worth checking. If so, they will probably have mentioned it somewhere on their website, or you can, if in case of doubt, you can always email their admissions department and ask if that's an option. So the minimum score requirements usually, it does vary by institution, but usually for TOEFL, it's 79 is the minimum out of, yeah, and for IELTS, it's 6.5. Yeah, so like I said, there are potential waivers for students, but some universities are very strict about this, others are more flexible. Always check, never assume. So yeah, usually all of the information that you need to apply is usually going to be on the website, including, whether you're eligible to apply for this particular program, what the application process will involve, what documents you require, what the application fees are, which tests you might need to take, and what the required score is, as well as selection criteria. So for official information, you always want to defer to the website of the official, department page, the official website of the college. If you're finding differing information online, always go with what's on the official page of the website. I will say here that having done a lot of applications, I know that college websites can be kind of frustrating, not always designed in the best way. But usually the information is there, even if you do have to search for it a little bit. And again, do not hesitate to reach out to the to the admissions department or to whoever is listed on the website if you're really having a tough time finding certain information or if you have doubts about anything. And yeah. And of course, sorry, application deadlines, do not forget to check. The first thing you should be checking when you're doing your research and looking at colleges to shortlist is to make a note of application deadlines, because while most colleges will have application deadlines around the same time, every program, every college has its own application deadlines. So keep track of them, use an Excel sheet, whatever you need to do. But that's an important thing to keep track of. Okay, so in terms of deadlines, some universities have rolling applications and some have a fixed application deadline, which means, so, rolling, obviously, I mean, a rolling deadline means that they will accept applications throughout the year until that. They will accept applications until their until their class is at capacity. That's what a rolling applications mean. So usually you want to apply as soon as you can for rolling applications, but there's not like a fixed deadline for them. And some colleges have a fixed application deadline. So again, check. Most graduate schools in the US have application deadlines between October and December, which means that you need to, all the documents and requirements that we talked about on the previous slide, you need to have those ready to go, including your English language, test scores, or your GMAT, GRE scores, your letters of recommendation, your SOP, all of that. Between March and June is when universities usually send out decisions and offer letters. Again, I hand it over to, I believe, Daksh.
Yeah. Thanks, Mahathi, Gayathree, Taha. Fantastic, I think, overview of things. I'll just briefly speak over the next 3 slides, which will be the last 3 slides. I know you guys want to ask your questions, and that's what we're here for. So in terms of scholarships and fundings, there are possibly 3 main categories of scholarships and fundings that you can get in the US. One is university-specific or school-specific scholarships. There is a balance between merit-based and need-based in these, but from my experience, it relies heavily on merit rather than need, which might be problematic. But that's the way the game is played here. So you can apply to a lot of these school-specific, university-specific scholarships. The second one are more external scholarships by big players. For example, Fulbright, Rotary, Join Japan. Inlax is also one of them now because it sponsors a lot of students coming to the US. These often they might cover 100% of tuition. Some might even give you assistance to live here as well. It depends. Always check on their websites what they're offering, what they're not offering. Some also offer visa services. For example, Fulbright has different requirements for visa purposes as well. So always it's good to check these kinds of things when you are applying for them and to check your eligibility as well. And the third big bucket in this is loans and financial aid. You can take a loan from India if you're coming to the US. You can take one in the US. There's a whole calculus behind what interest rates are prevailing, how much do you have to pay back. There is loan assistance repayment programs in the US that you can use if your income is below a certain threshold. So again, a lot of details to deal with here. So best to check with all the respective institutions. There are two other things listed on this slide, which is graduate assistantship, GAs, and fellowships. This I think we'll talk about on the next slide, which is on working, if I'm right. Yes, great. So there are a lot of avenues to work while in the US. First and the most apparent one is on-campus employment. So when your school is in session, when you are studying, when that's the primary thing that you do at school, you can be employed up to 20 hours per week on campus. On campus mean you can do work in the library, work in the mess, you can do research assistantships, you can do course assistantships where you help professors, etc. But on-campus employment is a very restrictive term. You can't go out of your school or out of your university to work. And they're pretty strict about it in the US. I have seen a lot of students go past this and they were, severely penalized. So I won't recommend doing non-on-campus employment. So that's one thing that you need to keep in mind. If you're doing a 2-year program, you also have the summer in between your year 1 and year 2. And that's when, if it depends on what kind of degree you are doing. Some offer direct summer internships. Others, you have to use your CPT or your OPT. These are very confusing terms, which mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So CPT is usually used for when you are an active student. It's curricular practical training. Usually, most students use it for summer internships between their year 1 and year 2. Of course, whenever you are working in the US, when you are on a student visa, you have to work within your field of study. So you can't go work in a McDonald's if you're studying engineering here. That's the bottom line of it. The third one listed on the slide is OPT. OPT is for when you graduate. The regulations in the visa are set up as such that each international student gets 1 year, up to 12 months of work authorization automatically, irrespective of what degree you're doing at each level of degree. So if you did a bachelor's here, you get 1 year. If you did a master's here, then you get a 1 year, PhD 1 year, so on and so forth. And this is given to everyone, irrespective of whether it's a STEM or not. The second to OPT is some degrees in the US are STEM eligible. What this means is that in addition to the 1 year that you get with OPT, you get 2 more years to work. So a total of 3 years after your degree, you can work in the US. Check your schools or your courses website. If they are STEM, they will put it up very proudly because they see it as a very flagship feature. If not, if they've not written it, they're probably not STEM. So worth checking out if you want to stay in the US long term, if that's something that's on the back of your mind. STEM might be a very important component of this to you. Internships and co-ops, you can also do like academic credits in which you don't take a course, but you pair up with a professor and do some external research in the shadow of it being a pseudo course. Those things are very widely available here in the US. You might want to do something that's not in the coursework, not in the curriculum, but it's very relevant to your program and what you want to do in the future. So in that case, you need to convince your advisor, your academic dean, and everyone else that it's relevant to you and that you will get academic credits for it. So that's the internship and co-ops part of it. Next slide, please. Okay, the last slide is career outcomes, perhaps the most uncertain of all of the slides that we have talked about. So as I said, F1 student visa allows you 1 year of work authorization in the US on an F1. You don't have to immediately switch to a different visa. OPD is 12 months. STEM gives you additional 2 years, so a total of 3 years. Then you have different types of visas kick in depending on where you want to work, what your degree is, what your field is. That is the H-1B visa, which is for business personnel or corporate personnel, in which the employer now sponsors your visa. So you will essentially be leaving your student visa and going on to an employer-based visa who will be sponsoring your stay in the US. There are like, I think 26 type of visas which you can get in the US. So EB1, EB2, EB3, O, J, I mean, just count all the alphabets. It's very difficult to understand all of this in a 30-minute webinar. So don't worry too much about it. If you are looking to stay in the US long term, I would say STEM is probably the easiest way you can get in by getting 3 years, and then you can transition to these different kinds of visas, right? So that's the bottom line on these outcomes. The things that not mentioned in the career outcome things, I think that I was thinking about recently are your career outcomes depend, I think, mainly on 4 things. And these are all paramount, and I've been through this process, so I know them quite closely. One is there is a lot of path dependence in the US. What this means is what you have come doing into your graduate degree, it is more likely than not that you will get jobs in the same field. If you're doing monitoring and analysis, that's what your employer will see. If you're doing some kind of engineering, some kind of mechanical engineering, that's what your employer will see. I would say it's difficult to switch fields when you're in the US, when you have done a particular degree. So be careful about that. I mean, if you want to switch from, let's say, an engineer to being an economist, then you have to plan your graduate program that way. You have to take courses that way in order for you to be able to transition or pivot to that different kind of field. So that's very important. There's a lot of path dependence in the US. The second thing that affects career most is it matters less what you know rather than who you know. Who you know matters a lot in the US. That's why everyone here says networking is key, networking is key. It really is. I mean, I've been in the job hunt for the past 4 months. I never thought that I would have to do this, but everyone has to do this. That's the way the game is set up. You really have to, reach out to everyone. It might be transactional, it might be long term, but you have to build those relationships while you are in school or while you are doing your internships or anything else. It's very important to build your network while you're here and rely on them to get you a job because merit, quote unquote, might not work as well as you think it would in the US. So building these connections is a very important part of getting the career that you want out of your graduate school. The third, and I think a relatively modest part, is market conditions. Sometimes the economy in the US is in a recession. Worldwide, things are happening here and there. So it depends a lot. One underappreciated aspect of this is if you are doing something like econ or public policy or something that is very attached to the socio-political context here in the US, you will have a harder time of doing it. For example, I did a public policy degree and I graduated right when an election is taking place in which there are 2 candidates who differ so much on policy that all firms, private and public, are very uncertain of what's going to happen next. So they immediately stop hiring, right? So these things, while they're not told to you, these are very salient things that you need to keep in mind while trying to do these degrees. I know it's very hard to predict what's going to happen, but there are certain markers that you can use to, bring forbearance on this. And all of this, all 3 in 50%, the rest of 50% for your career outcomes is your luck. Nobody says it out loud, but if you're lucky, you'll get it. If you're unlucky, you do whatever you want, you won't get it. So try to, my entire point with the luck thing being, it's not entirely up to you what happens to you here as much as you would like to control it. So if you get a job, be grateful that you were lucky. Of course, there is a part of merit to it that you did well, you did your connections and everything else that tips the balance a little bit. But luck in the end plays a very big role in all of these things that is not, I think, appreciated more in these circles. So I'll stop here. I'll give it back to Gayathree, and we are happy to take any questions that you guys have.
Thank you, Daksh. That is not what I was hoping to hear in my final year of the PhD, but well, it is what it is. Great. So I think we are now ready to transition to the Q&A part of the session. That was extremely comprehensive. I regret that I'm in the UK now, but let's turn to the questions from our attendees. If you don't want to turn on your video, don't want to unmute yourself, please feel free to pop your questions in the chat. I know that Mahathi has already been answering a few questions. Those that are left unaddressed, of course, I'll read them out to the panelist. Let's start with Barha.
Hi, everybody. Am I audible to all?
Yes.
So I hope everybody is doing great and you guys are doing an amazing job. First of all, it's been really helpful. I've been attending your sessions lately. So my question is that, especially for Taha, Firdous, Shah, if it is, since I'm a Kashmiri as well and you're a Kashmiri as well, see, I am a second year law student right now in Srinagar, Jammu and Kashmir, and I was hoping for a master's in the USA. I have attended the webinar for UK as well, but since there are better scholarship opportunities in the USA, I wanted to ask, what is the minimum amount of GPA that I need to maintain to get into Ivy Leagues or any other college that will provide me like 100% scholarship in the USA? I do have to take LSATs. I got that from the webinar only, that I have to take LSATs. But does my actual academic performance during my course, my bachelor degree course, does that matter as well? Since I'm from Kashmir, we don't have a GPA system here. We have percentages and the other forms of it. So I wanted you to clarify that. Second, I wanted to ask, in which year should I start applying for my master's degree? Like in the UK session, I heard some of the panelists say that they all applied in their final year, they applied a year before their final year so that they could take their time and submit the documents or the mark sheets that they had from the previous years. So is it necessary that I can only apply after I'm done with my bachelor's degree, or can I apply during the course of it as well? That
Sure.
would be all.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Barha, for asking this question. Can you just confirm with me which year of your law degree are you in?
I am in my second year. I'm currently in my 5th semester. I still have 5 more to go.
Okay. Okay. Good that you're thinking about it quite early on. Although my expertise is not in law and how to apply for law programs, Gayathree might help you better with that. But Gayathree is in the UK. First thing first that I would tell is in most of these prestigious academic institutions, no matter how well you've done in other places, the primary criteria of them even looking at your application is your GPA. So how it usually would happen is if they have an applications of say 200 people, they would sort it out on a Excel sheet, see who all have like the highest number of grades, and then sort out the application further on. That would mean that a GPA is really important. My understanding is for Ivy Leagues, it should not be lesser than 3.924 or 3.8 would also be like 3.8 and above is what my understanding is good for an Ivy League. I'm pretty sure Daksh can highlight more on that because he's part of one. And the other thing is, I do understand that we don't have GPA systems back in India, but our percentages are always convertible to how it would look like for the GPAs. For example, the UK has a different percentage system as opposed to the US or even India, but there are always methods of calculating your GPA within the US standards. You could look up online very easily. If you have say what 75%, just go online and you can see like if you have a 3.5 and above, that's not so difficult. The other thing is no, it's not important that you need to complete your degree as is to apply for your program, although I'm not really sure on how law things work because you're supposed to be sitting for LSAT and other things. My understanding is usually like sitting and charting out where you want to go right in your say 4th year. If your law program is like in your for 5 years, in the 4th year, like the second half of your 4th year, you should be able to chart out where you want to be going, how you want to pursue it, and start talking to people. The application process, quite honestly, for any university abroad is not just about you looking up online and trying to apply to a program, but it's also, as Daksh said, networking and trying to see who is where, how they can help you out with not just entire application process in general, but with some tips. So I would say second year of the fourth year is the best time that you look up things. And applying, I guess fifth year is when you should be applying for it. But since I'm not very clear about how law programs work, you should probably get in touch with somebody who does law here in the US.
Sorry,
I hope that
I don't mind coming in on that if that's okay, because I did apply to the US when I was considering masters abroad. You don't need the LSAT. If you're applying for an LLM in the US, you don't have to give the LSAT. Like Taha just mentioned, if you're applying in the fifth year of your undergraduate degree, just as you're about to finish your undergraduate degree, that's more than enough. But on the other hand, if you are considering the JD, that's what you'll need the LSAT for. The JD is something that you do after you finish, like major in something else, like do your undergraduate degree in something else. If you want to then do law in the US, that's when you do the JD. So that's the only situation in which you're going to have to take the LSAT, not for the LLM. So you're going to first have to figure out what it is that you want to do. Do you want to do an LLM, which will be like a 1-year degree, or a JD, which I suppose depending on the university, is it an SJD or a JD? It'll be 2 or 3 years long. So yeah, that'll be the first step for you. But I will let Daksh, I don't remember the GPA requirements anymore. I did have the sense that they had more of a holistic view towards my application, but I'm very foggy with my memory here. So I'm going to hand it over to somebody else.
Yeah, no problem. But are great questions. So I had a GPA of 3.3 out of 3.4 in my undergrad, and I got in. I don't know whether that was because these admissions guys were stupid that they let me in, or whether it was luck, or whether it was something else. But my understanding of the process is it's much more holistic in masters as compared to undergrads. I think for undergrad, that was absolutely right in that they sort on GPAs and stuff like that because it's so competitive. Masters, it's a little bit more relaxed, and they're not only looking at your academic prowess, quote unquote, they're looking at who you are as a person and what you add to the overall admissions pool, right? So I think transcripts do tell a story, but they don't tell more than 10% of the story, right? It's your SOPs, your essays, your answers to their questions, your LORs, how you format your CV, what you write in there, what your personal circumstances are, how well you were able to blend that into an application package is, I think, what matters to get into Ivy Leagues. At the end of the day, and this is something I was thinking about earlier also, is you are not selling your credentials on the master's market. Every one of your competitors, if you're coming to an Ivy League, is going to have that, right? You have done something excellent in quant, so have 500 other people. You have done something very excellent in IR, so have 5,000 other people, right? What matters is what's your story? How did you do it? What did you learn from that? How it made you a better person? Vice versa. I mean, I think you get the drift. Is you are selling your story to these guys and how your story can impact the bigger story, right? So it's your story you are selling, not your credentials. Your credentials are a very small part of your story from what I've understood by being here for 2 years. I've met people from all ranges of profession, of socioeconomic status, everyone. And everyone gets a place here because their stories are unique and because they add so much to the class, right? So I wouldn't say worry too much about GPAs. Sure, maintain a decent GPA. I would not go so far as to say that GPAs don't matter at all. That's not true. They do matter, but up to a very certain extent. It's your story that matters after that. To your second question on when to apply, I will differ from the panel on this any day. I don't think you should apply straight out of your undergrad. I think that's a terrible idea. It's an extremely terrible idea because of two things. One is because you don't have any work experience in the real sense of the word, where you've gone on the ground, worked, or something like that, you won't learn as much from a master's degree, right? It's essentially you are coming from an academic setting and then you're entering another academic setting. However different these academic settings might be, they're both academic settings at the end of the day. The real power of a master's degree is when you work and then you include that work experience in how it shapes your world and how it shapes your discussion at graduate school. This is what I have found, right? And the second reason why I think you should not apply right after your undergrad is your ability to contribute to discussions in the classroom and outside the classrooms will go down very significantly if you don't have any experience to speak of, right? When you are in a discussion, you will say, I read this in a book. The other person who has 3 or 4 years of experience will say, I have seen this on the ground, and that's why you are wrong. There is no counter to that, right? Lived experience has much more value and potential as compared to bookish knowledge. I am not demeaning bookish knowledge by any means. I think it's very important. But real life lived experience, the returns it gets you when you apply, is very high. In my perspective, it's a U-shaped curve. After, like, I think 6 or 8 years, it starts to go down for a master's degree, but up to like 5, 6, 7, 8 years, take the experience and then come in. Now, some circumstances won't allow you to do it. You might want to go out of India as soon as possible or things like those. Those are exceptional circumstances. In the normal way of things, I think you should at least have 2 to 3 years of experience before you apply for a master's degree in any field, irrespective of you're doing engineering, economics, law, etc., etc. So that's my 2 cents on those 2 questions.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just gonna extremely salient points made by Daksh, so I just want to second literally everything he just said. And also, as someone who came back into a master's program after 6 years of experience, it's been very valuable, and it's made my master's extremely useful because I know what I need from my master's for my career. For the GPA question, again, my program is quite selective, and there is a wide diversity of people from different countries, different educational backgrounds, different experience levels. So again, yeah, it's yes, your GPA matters, but also how you the kind of experience you have, has it made sense in terms of your overall trajectory? Like, have you been going towards something, and what have you learned from the experiences that you've had? Very important. So I just wanted to second that. He was absolutely right about pretty much everything. So
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. I'm just gonna flag that Mahathi has to hop off this call in the next 5 minutes. So if you have any questions specifically for Mahathi, I would recommend that you pop them in the chat, or those of you who have your hands raised, if any of your questions are for Mahathi, then please feel free to unmute yourself and
I
ask.
think there was a person with a question about international relations that I saw in the comments, who mentioned applying to Georgetown and Johns Hopkins
Oh,
and that sort
yes.
of thing.
Oh, okay,
Yes,
I'm
so
making that
that's
out. I graduated this year and currently I'm pursuing a 1-year PG diploma. I'm applying to East Coast schools such as Johns Hopkins, Columbia, Georgetown, and masters in IR. How can recent graduates like me stand against applicants who have years of experience for grad school in such selective schools? Any tips to cover this in our admission essays?
okay. So I'm sure that after whatever I say, Daksh is going to have an extremely intelligent answer. So I'm just going to keep it brief. I feel like the first mistake that a lot of applicants make when trying to write admissions essays is they try to write to what they think that the admissions committee wants to hear. So they try to, sort of make themselves sound better, or they try to stitch it up a particular way. But honestly, if you've had experiences that have genuinely shaped your desire to do a master's program, that authenticity really matters and it really comes across to admissions committees who are very used to sifting through these applications. So if I can give you one tip, it would be to focus on your why and to try to get that authenticity through. In terms of practical tips, I'm going to leave it to Daksh to answer after I'm gone. So
Perfect. Any other questions for Mahathi? Now is your chance to ask them. Okay, if not, then a huge thanks to Mahathi for joining us for this panel. Thank you. And of course, if anyone thinks of a question later, please don't hesitate to drop us an email with your question, or DM your question to us on LinkedIn or Instagram, and we'll forward them to Mahathi for an answer. Well, someone says, Mahathi, do you think it's
there's
better to
one.
do a master's in the US or the UK?
Okay, so this is actually a good question for me because I did 2 application cycles, and the first one I focused largely on the UK, and the second one I kind of changed my mind when I got into Georgetown. So I got into Sussex and East Anglia for development in the UK. In the first year, I actually was very close to going to East Anglia, which is a 1-year program. So what tipped the scales for me was some of the things that have already been mentioned in the presentations. In the 1-year programs I had gotten into in Sussex would have been, very tight, and it would have been fairly academic. And places like Sussex do have a lot of opportunities for exposure, for connections, and all of that. But in 1 year, there's only so much you can do. Whereas my Georgetown program is extremely practical. It's very practitioner focused, and it has a lot of built-in opportunities for internships. I have a capstone project, which is a client project. And it was also a lot more guided in the sense that the programs in the UK, you had your courses and you had your faculty, and it would kind of be what you took away would be what you made of the program. Whereas my program is actually very carefully built, and there's a lot of guidance and mentoring that happens, and that's what tipped the scales for me personally. This is very much going to depend on your personal circumstances, what you want to study, the degree of clarity that you have about which career that you want to pursue, and all of that. So that will obviously influence the degree to which you want guidance in your master's. So all of these things make a big difference. So if you're someone like me who needed sort of the structure and kind of the mentoring, you might get more drawn to a program where that is given. So always, your personal circumstances and what you want to do after your degree will matter. All right, I'm gonna hop off, but like Gayathree said, email your questions. I'm always happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mahathi. Okay, let's get back to some of those raised hands. Shahbaz, you have the floor.
Hello. Yes, so I've moved to the US this fall for my master's degree. I was a practicing lawyer back in India where I was into securities law. And currently I'm doing a STEM course. And I'm kind of, dealing with the transition as well as the networking thing, which Daksh had mentioned. So the thing is, if I'm planning for a PhD, what would you suggest? Like to kind of network internally, or also try to, network with other university professors or anything. Like I want to utilize the OPT that I have for my master's, but after that, if I want to go for PhD, what path should I take?
So I think Gayatri can answer law-specific questions. I have no clue about law, how it works, everything else. On the networking bit, I can say network to as many people as you can, as is humanly possible. Network inside your dorms, outside your dorms, inside university, outside your university, in the US, outside the US. See, the thing about networking is that if it works well, it works very well. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's about it, right? The worst networking can do to you is take away 15 minutes of your time from speaking to someone. The best it can do is land you a job that will change your life forever, right? So network as much as possible. I know there are on a scale of being introvert to extrovert, there are a lot of people who don't like networking. I personally, when I came to the US, didn't like the concept of asking favors, doing transactional kind of conversations. But this is how the world is. It's how it's structured. You have to play that game in order to win, in order to get ahead, right? So don't limit yourself, don't limit your networking to any extent, I would say. And otherwise, I think all the law specific things, Gayatri is better able to answer those questions. So I'll leave it up to her.
To be very honest with you, Shahbaz, I'm not sure that I'm the best place to answer the specific question that you have asked. So is there any way I can convince you to bring this question back to one of our future panels in this US series? Because you will have others who are more familiar with the law setting in the US also joining as panelists. So I don't want to give you the wrong advice.
No, so currently I'm not into law. I
Okay.
have moved to a technical field from law.
Right.
For the obvious reasons of having the STEM, because I tried for law in the US, but considering LLM was just for 10 months and JD, even 2 years was costing too much with no scholarship. So I have moved to the technical field and currently working on it. So if I plan to do PhD in the same field, I was wondering how do I approach professors, or what strategy should I be having from the first years of master's itself?
If I jump in very quickly, because it seems like you need a general overview of how to go forward and ahead from your masters. Shahbaz, I would suggest, I mean, I do understand like how networking is important in the US. Somebody once told me that the merit is 20% and 80% of your life in the US is networking. But for a PhD program, networking is of different sorts. Networking with the professors is what ideally I would think of. And this around this time is the best time when you write to them. Write to them as soon as possible and tell them about your interests, even if they aligned really barely. You will always get to hear back from them and they can suggest you somebody who they think is a perfect fit for you. So my suggestion would be to write to them ASAP and try and get an understanding of where they direct you or where they can accept you in some senses. I hope that answers your question.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Garima, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the major reality check. My question was around funding, actually. So, what if I get an admit, but I get either a partial funding or just tuition waiver? And if I still need more funding to, let's say, cover my living expenses or something like that, what measures or what approaches I can take in the following months, like in the period before I actually go, to increase my likelihood of securing that funding via, let's say, an assistantship or something else? Yeah, thank you.
I think Daksh should be able to answer that. I have no
Yeah.
idea.
So Garima, good question. I think funding is a very big problem with masters and overall also. So if you have gotten partial funding or if you do get partial funding, congratulations on that. That's a huge feat in itself. The thing with funding in the US usually is that in order for you to get your visas, your F1 stamps, you have to show that you can support yourself in the US in order to get that I-20. These are technical terms. You will understand what they mean as you go along. So you will need to show that funding upfront, at least for the tuition and the living cost as calculated by the school. This is a Department of Homeland Security requirement, so it really, I mean, universities can't do anything about it. So as far as, relying on funding from these teaching assistantship, research, etc., I would say the quantum of these things is usually restricted to they can cover your living expenses or things like those, but they really won't go into the savings kind of portfolio if you are thinking about that. As for upfront funding, the only two things I can think of is one is you go to external funds like INLACs. There's a Tata Memorial Scholarship, I think, that does loans free of interest. There are many other things. I think Project EduAccess websites has a lot of these things there. So do check out these resources. There are a lot of also government funded scholarships, especially from the federal government, the central government in India, as well as some state governments for specific groups of people. So when I went to Harvard, the government of Rajasthan sponsored me to go to Harvard. So you can check those out. They're not very publicized in the sense that you might not have heard of them, but they might exist. So it's good to, scour the internet or, some of your connections in order to get these things. The only other thing I can think of is then taking a loan or doing some kind of, either a formalized or an informal loan from family or otherwise. It's difficult. You have to take into account if you want to do it from India, from the US, how you want to transfer, how you to pay back that loan. Because I've had a lot of friends who have had to change their career trajectories because they had taken a loan and they have to repay that loan. So these are good public servant people who wanted to go into that service, but because it does not pay that well and they had a lot of debt, they had to choose private companies just so that they can repay that loan. So it has changed their career trajectory for at least 2 to 5 years after graduating. So these are very difficult, hard questions that you need to grapple with. So I think as soon as possible, get an understanding of what you have secured and how you can make up the difference based on these 2 or 3 things that we were just discussing. Always good to have like financial blueprint in mind before going, rather than relying on these RA ships, TA ships, GA ships. These are like these tantamount to like change in your pocket when you're there in the US, because there are a lot of expenses that need to be met when you are in the US, especially vis-a-vis health insurance, accommodation, food, etc., etc. So those would be like the 2 or 3 big ones that you can look at.
Yeah, got it. Thank you so much. Actually, I haven't secured it yet. I'll be applying this year.
Yeah.
And another question, and just quickly around that, was that I'm currently working on my essay. And I've been realizing that as I reflect on my experiences, which are sort of limited in terms of research and internships, whatever I reflect feels kind of artificial or like sort of hollow, even though they personally are genuine to me. But I feel like from a third person, it comes off as a bit in the air, you know. So how do I navigate that? It's a very like a thing, something I'm working on, but it's a dilemma. So yeah, if you can throw light on that.
Yeah, I mean, is the $1 million question. What will get you in? How will you reflect, etc. But one thing I picked up on is that you said that you were reflecting on your internships, your work experience, etc. Understand that these do not form the entire part of you. Your personal motivation, your personal story is what makes up a great chunk of that. Maybe you have had some familial experiences that have changed your perspective on the world. Maybe you had to go through some hardship that has changed your view of how you view the world. So these are all very, we as Indians, a lot of us tend to undersell ourselves in the adversity that we have overcome, right? So that is completely up to you if you want to use that or not as part of your identity when you're applying to these schools. But a lot of students do use them, and they form a lot of the basis for your why me kind of answer to that why me question. So I would say reflect more on your personal life rather than your professional life if you don't have that much experience. And usually what helps is talk to your family and friends who have known you for a long time, right? You might not be able to remember everything exactly as it happened, but these guys will, and they will tell you, you can include this, you can include that. That's one group of people that can help you. The second group of people that can help you are outsiders, like the 3 of us on this panel who don't know you personally. So often what you say and what you communicate is not what we are hearing, right? There's a difference between those two. If you're saying this, we are hearing this usually. And what happens is when you come to ask for feedback, any of your mentors that you assign, they will tell you what they are reading and what they're understanding. And then you can bring it up to the level of what you actually want to say, right? So these are, I think, 2 groups of people that can help you like introspect. But at the end of the day, it's an exercise that is individual centric. And so you need to do your own reflections in that. So I know that's
Yeah,
not good
makes
advice.
sense.
That's not great advice, but yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Perfect. Sonam, you can ask your question now.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Sonam. Actually, I'm doing my BSc Agriculture and I'm in the last year of it. And I don't have any work experience as of now because our internship program has been removed from our course. And if I want to apply for the master program, will it impact on my admission course? And also, can strong GRE score compensate for having no experience or internship?
I will answer briefly, but on the GRE part, maybe Daksh, if you have information on that, please do, because I never gave a GRE. I applied during COVID and it was waived off. So for your bachelor's program, if you're still in your bachelor's program and how you want to exhibit more of your interests in what you have done in your bachelor's program, I would suggest that you spend some more time doing internships. If you're not able to do it within your program duration, then I would suggest that you stop by and reflect a little more on how what you have studied employs in the field as Daksh already pointed that out, and then apply for it, because that gives you an understanding of what you also like in agriculture. Looking at things on a piece of paper and trying to look them up might sound interesting to you, but when it comes to working on that in the field, and field here I mean like a lab or something of that sort, it might be difficult or different. So I suggest that you have some internship experience to be able to identify firstly your own research interests to be able to do a master's program. I always tell this to students and I will tell it here as well. Any program post graduation should not be considered a degree up in the academic profile, but should be seen as something that can either impact your career opportunities better or can cater to your own personal interests in academic industry as is.
Yeah, I think quickly on the GRE part, Sonam, I don't think GRE is quote unquote substitute for your work experience. To my knowledge and to my extent of what I've heard from admissions committees, it's a screening test. Basically, can you do math and can you write or read English? That's all about it. GRE, this has become a personal information session for me at this point. I got a 320, 323 out of a 340 on a GRE, and yet Harvard took me in. Again, don't know if these guys are stupid or luck or anything else. So you can get in without a great GRE, a quote unquote 333 plus score as well. So of course, the GRE won't substitute for your experience. On that part, I think even if you're doing agricultural sciences or any other sort of thing, you might have done some research with a professor, with some outside partners, etc. While that traditionally does not count as experience, you can potentially exhibit as an experience, saying that I worked with this professor on this real life problem, worked on this, this is the final product, things like those, even if it's not published. I mean, of course, that also can't completely substitute for your work experience, but that's as close as I think you can get from an academic setting to portraying it as a professional kind of work. So yeah, it's difficult, but if you are able to, I would say don't look at applying for masters just yet. Try to understand what's in the field first by working for a couple of years, and then maybe try it. I know that's not always possible, but that is my general recommendation to people who are trying to apply for masters for the various reasons that I outlined in the talk.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you as well, Sonam. Also, a huge thanks to Taha for taking the 10,000 questions in the chat. Thank you. I just wanted to ask Daksh or Taha, do either of you know anything about the STEM getaways that one of our attendees is asking about? How helpful are STEM getaways and masters in international relations for acquiring better job security in the US? If the STEM getaways compromise on my academic interests and alter my career concentration. Okay, I don't think any of us here are familiar with
Yeah,
what
no
this.
idea. No idea.
As I see this question, let's remind them on the 26th or 27th, we have something for sciences for STEM particularly. Probably you come back then and you will for sure get an answer to this.
And we are also likely to have STEM panelists over the coming weekend for the sessions on, graduate applications to Ivy League. So either bring the question to the next weekend sessions or to the STEM panel directly. Okay, let's go back to the raised hands. Midhat, go for it.
Hello, hi. So my question is regarding again funding. So I know for a fact that more than 20 hours of on-campus work is not allowed in the US. But what about working virtually or having a passive income sort of running back in India or something of that? So are there certain rules or regulations to that as well?
I mean, I think the US needs to most of the times know what you're doing wherever you are. So given the US setup, it might not be permissible as is, but I don't have a full answer.
Yeah, Milad, you are playing outside the law on this one. Be very careful about what happens. No, so let me come to this from a different perspective. Think about the time you have. If you sleep for 10 hours, you have 14 hours in a day. I'm assuming you will engage most of that in academic training. Then you will do 20 hours of per week employment. And then you were saying that you will do another chunk of work back home or something like that. I would not recommend it at all. This is from the bottom of my heart, a person who likes to work very much. Your downtime and your social time is as important as anything else when you are in the US. Burnout is a very real thing when you come to US universities because they are so competitive and because they are so busy all the time. You need to have your downtime. You need to have something outside the university and the work atmosphere to calm you down. For me, that's for sports. For you, it might be something else. The second thing about this is you need to have time to socialize. You need to have time to make friends with your cohort classmates, your professors, go to dinner meetings, go to lunch meetings, whatever, right? You need to explore more. So I understand that finances are very tough, but I think your time is even tougher to come by. And if you lose this time in doing just study and work, I think you would look back after 2 years that you have not done you have not justified yourself fully to the program that you're committing to. So having understood like there are a lot of restrictions on a lot of students in order to do these things, I would say try and figure out a balance of these things. If you have to work necessarily, you can. I mean, you just don't tell people. Also, bear in mind that India and US have a 9 or a 10-hour time difference. So if you are thinking of working in India, you'll have to work nights in the US. That is after you've done your college, after you've done 20 hours, then you are working the night as well. So, I mean, just think this through once. If you are trying to pursue this line of reasoning or line of work, it's going to be very difficult. And the best of us can't do it properly without like for a very long time. For short bursts, sure, but it's very difficult to do in the long run.
Hi, so thank you so much. So the question was mostly in regard to, if something's already going on in India and then I'll have to stop just because, I'm moving to the US. So I just wanted to understand that whether it's something that I can continue or I'll have to completely shut down. So thank
Oh,
you so
you
much.
can continue. I mean, yeah, you can continue, but then be
Yeah,
mindful that you don't take 20 hours of employment there in the US.
I see.
Most organizations usually understand this time difference thing and that you are transitioning from a working professional to academic life kind of schedule. So if you are on good terms with your managers, with your bosses, etc., try to explain this to them that you can work, maybe 4 hours in a week spread over your own timeline and things like those. If they understand good enough, you can continue working. There are also reporting requirements for these things because you might be earning something in India. It does not exempt you from paying taxes because you are physically working from the US if you are deciding to do that. So it's tricky, is what I'm trying to say, that you have to be very careful about not breaking the law on these things, because the first thing that they will do is cancel your visa and there's nothing you can do about it. It's a unilateral decision by these guys if they find out what you're doing is illegal. So be very careful about what you do, how you do it, and be very cognizant of the rules and regulations and procedures around doing it.
Yeah, and especially it is important for those who plan on settling back in the US, because these things will finally count in when you're, say, applying for your green card applications and other things, where they get hold of everything that you have done. And I think somebody has also pointed this out in the chat, and they say that in one of the sessions that this attended, they informed that the students that even earning out of a YouTube channel will also count as an out off campus job. So understand the dynamics of how off-campus jobs are considered and how they can impact you negatively, as you were to look at in a larger level. Not to say so many people do it, but they're doing it at the cost of risking their own lives. We would not suggest it as is.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. I'm just going to quickly turn to some of those pending questions from the chat. So this question always comes up in every session. Will we still be eligible to apply for a master's in the US if we have a 3-year bachelor degree instead of a 4-year bachelor's degree? Does either of you have any insights into this?
I did a master's, so I'm not really sure how it happens, but I know so many people who even got after from a 3-year degree, at least for the UK, Gayathree. I know so many who just got right after their bachelor's, but I don't know about masters. Daksh.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can. Mostly you can. So it depends school to school. Some schools do require a 4-year kind of undergrad. In that case, what you can usually do, and this is with a big if that you need to take this, is do a PG diploma or some of that sort, which is recognized by the university. So you will have fulfilled the 3+1 requirement there. That's a workaround. That's not a substitute for the traditional 4-year things that usually US considers to be a quote unquote bachelor's degree. There are ways to work around this. You might write to the school that I don't have this. Can I do anything else in order to satisfy that requirement? Something of that sort. Maybe they respond, maybe they don't. Maybe they put some conditions on your admissions that you get admissions based on this. There are ways to work around it, but yeah, I mean, this is a case-to-case basis kind of thing. So I don't think we can generalize anything on this.
Perfect. That's really helpful to know. There are a couple of questions pertaining to the path dependence point that you made earlier, Daksh. So there's someone who's saying, I've done a master's in sociology, but I'm very keen on pursuing a PhD in public health. Will that be a wise move or not?
I am not a sage, by the way, guys. So I don't know the answer to this. It might be depending on your interest. My entire point about path dependence was that when you do pursue a career after your master's degree, there usually is a lot of dependence on what you did earlier as to what you will do going forward. So the signal that your earlier work is sending to employers is that you can do this job and you can do it well. That's why you've done it for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and that you'll be able to, transfer those skills into the next one. Now, a lot of students see graduate programs in the US as a stepping off stone into a different kind of life. For that, it's completely doable, by the way. The only thing is, in the 2 or 3 years, or in the case of PhDs, in the 6 or 7 years that you're here, you need to tailor your your program that way in order to make that jump, make that shift. So, maybe if you're coming from a sociology background, you want to do a public health background, in the 2 or 3 years or whatever duration you're here, try and do more of public health. Right? Do more projects, do more research on that, connect with more professors in that particular area. So those might work to your advantage. Even that is not a guarantee that you will be able to shift out, right? There are one of two things that will happen in the end is either you will be able to successfully transition out. The second thing is you can transition out, but work at the intersection of, let's say, sociology and public health. So this interdisciplinary kind of work is going on a lot right now in the US. And that's a very good thing if you have both those backgrounds. You will have both those backgrounds. And the last thing is absolute worst comes to shit, you continue with what you did before and try and do a professional kind of switching later on and pivot from there. So these are like the three things, but you can pivot yourself within the academic institution that you're studying in order to move to a different kind of field. That's entirely possible.
Perfect. Thank you. Just one more question from the chat. Is there like a database or some sort of a website that you recommend where, people can find a list of master's degrees or PhD positions that they can apply to in the US? Anything that you found helpful during your own applications journey?
I mean, for PhD, it's usually like reading books, bibliographies, and seeing who is doing what and going back to them. That's for at least for the social sciences part of it. That's the directory. Obviously a very difficult one, but if you're interested in research, that's how you reach to that. But there are many places like probably like Reddit is one of the best sources these days. I mean, I've seen, especially in the US, everybody's on Reddit and they find such informative stuff there, even for basic things. I mean, if you want to think about groceries, you have answers on Reddit. If you were to think about biological sciences, cancer biology, you have things on Reddit. For example, if you want to do an MBA, say, for an instance, right? MBA in the US, Reddit, and see what people have to say. Sometimes you get like really crappy information, but most of the times it's really helpful. And then you can, tag those threads and reach somewhere.
Yeah, for one database, I don't know of any database that exists like that. But apart from what Taha said, which is like very useful to track people over time rather than institutions over time, is look at someone you want to be. There is a professional that you admire very well. Look at them, look at where they've gone to, and then try and follow that thread from there, right? So you can look universities like this. The second thing that's helpful is usually when you do a Google search for, I mean, everybody has a dream university in mind, right? A dream program in mind that this is the best thing that could happen to us if we get in there. Once you do Google search, you will get similar results within Google itself. Look all those up. That's two. The third one is look at, and this is like, take this with a huge bag of salt, is look at QS World rankings and stuff within your thematic area, right? So you will find universities that are quote unquote like-minded in their approach to doing the kind of study that you want to do, right? So for example, in the field of public policy, once you look for Harvard and Chicago, 6 appear almost instantaneously at the same moment. And those are all like 8 of them, a group of bunch of 8 or 10. All people who apply to the US for public policy do end up applying to at least 5 or 6 of those universities. So that's third. And the fourth is speak to people like us who have done these sort of things, who know what good schools are there because, we have a lot of connections there as well. We have gone through these processes. So I think those 4 things you might be able to do in lieu of a master dashboard, so to say.
That's wonderful. I don't know if the attendees will take you up on this offer, but you know that the team at Project EduAccess will take you up on this offer. Great. I think Taha has already answered one of the questions that just came in. There's another interesting question. Just how Taha and Daksh pointed out their insights for someone considering a master's right after their UG. Could you please give some insights for someone who's considering a PhD right after a master's? Any checklists, any must-dos? I'm someone who has completed a master's and have worked for a while, but I'm interested in research now. Taha,
Okay, story of my life, and maybe probably for most of the students coming in from South Asia. I was just having a discussion with a colleague here the other day, and we were saying that how in the global South, more particularly academia or any academic study is considered just like a climbing the ladder, as opposed to how people here in the West look at PhD. PhD is when you really are interested in doing what you want to do. For me, I knew right from the start, at least, or it was, in some senses imposed or put across to me that this is what I should be doing in my life. So I knew it right when I was in my undergrad degree, especially for social sciences. You mostly look at like doing a higher up degree. It's completely all right. I think I'm surviving. I got into a master's program right after I finished my bachelor's. There was a difference of 1 month between me shifting from my bachelor's to master's. And I spent, say, 7-8 months before I graduated from a master's program in the UK. And then I moved to doing my PhD. I think it's completely all right to even do that, especially in the social sciences. If you have a niche that you've already identified that you want to work on, it's completely all right. You don't really need a lot of work exposure as is, but it's always suggested and recommended. Even if you were to ask me, should I do it as right after my master's, when I'm not very clear on the topic that I want to do, I would suggest that spend some more time and think about your topic more elaborately by talking to people, looking at works of other people, reading, etc. But if you're clear on what you want to work on, if you have an idea, okay, this is what I want to work on, it should not necessarily be 100% clarity, but you're more than 50% clear on what you want to work on, then it's completely all right to do it right after your master's, even if you've just worked for, say, a few months or a year or so.
Wonderful. I think there are no other questions. But even if there are, this is not your last opportunity to learn more about the US and what graduate study in the US looks like. This is just the first of a series of 8 workshops. So there are 7 more workshops where you can ask your questions, and I would highly recommend that you bring your questions to the next set of sessions, since we are already way past the scheduled time for this session. But as always, a huge thanks to Taha and Daksh, and also to Mahathi for making time for this session and staying overtime as they do every single time for us. If you have any further questions specifically directed at Taha or Daksh or Mahathi, please don't hesitate to email us or DM us on social media, and we'll try getting these questions answered for you. But also please know that there are more sessions happening as part of the Study in USA series. As you know, over the next weekend, both on Saturday as well as Sunday, we will have a session each on graduate applications to Ivy League universities. The exact universities that we'll cover in each of these sessions will be shared with you during the week. So if you aren't following us on our social media, do it now. So you have all the information you need. And a recording of this session will be up on our YouTube channel within a day or two. So do subscribe to that YouTube channel as well. Once again, a huge thanks, everyone, and see you at the next workshop. Bye.
See you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.